We're going to be looking in Proverbs chapter 31 this morning. That's where we're going to spend most of our time. We're going to start in Isaiah and head over there. But Proverbs 31 is where we're going to spend most of our time today. I did a funeral for a grandmother, and she was also a great-grandmother. And that was in the town of Mountain View. Her last name was Chowning. And those of you guys from Mountain View, you've heard of those Chownings. And the Chownings used to have a lunch after every church service, pretty much. They'd go over to Grandma and Grandpa's house. And Grandma Chowning would cook and would spend time with the grandkids. And on a Sunday morning, they would just all gather over there when church was over. And that was like their family tradition. And she famously got to know every grandkid so that she sort of understood that they, what they were like and their uniqueness. And so she would do special things with that kid that she might not do with somebody else. So she sort of tailored the things that she did when she spent time with her grandkids. She sort of tailored it to each kid and what they liked and what they were really into. And when you do a funeral for someone and the family is talking about that person that has been a part of their life for many years, it makes a huge difference, just those little things that happen in life. And that's what everybody talks about. That's what all the grandkids remembered. And they couldn't stop talking about their grandma. And they couldn't stop talking about Grandma Chowning or Mom. Or even for those, she was a great-grandmother. They couldn't stop talking about her because of how awesome that she was. And how much that they appreciated her. And it's really easy to do a funeral like that when you're preaching, when all you really have to do is just brag on the person. Because they were so loved. And they poured out their life to other people. I went to another funeral of a preacher. A preacher I had known. I attended his funeral. I didn't have to do that one, but I attended it. He was a longtime pastor. He was well known. And you would think that when you go to a pastor's funeral that everybody would brag on him. You would think. He's a pastor. He's going to heaven, right? He had the job. You're doing okay. You would think that everybody would brag on him. But more than once in the funeral, and I've never seen this in any other funeral, more than once in the funeral, family, friends, they would mention that sometimes he was a jerk. And like I said, I knew him, so I knew that as well. I did. I wasn't sitting in the pew disagreeing with him. It's true. More than once. I mean, because he could be rude, and he was occasionally. Sometimes he might berate the girl working at McDonald's as if it was her fault, or he might yell at the refs at the game. I'm guilty of that as well. I'd known him, and there were moments when they would mention that he had just sometimes been a jerk. And the crazy thing is that we go through life and we can believe the right things, and we can even be religious. We can be so religious that we even take a ministry job. We can be a pastor of some kind. We might just know the Bible really well. We might grow up in church, and we might know the words to the songs that we sing. But God said things like this in the Bible. As we get ready for this sermon, He said things like this in the Bible. He said in Isaiah chapter 1, verse 13, He said, "Stop bringing useless offerings." By the way, this is Old Testament, so that's how they worshipped. You go to the temple, you'd bring an offering. And they had music there as well, but they didn't have a church service the same way we do. But when they went and did something religious, they did things like this. They brought an offering. He says, "Your incense is detestable to me. New moons and Sabbaths and the calling of solemn assemblies. I cannot stand iniquity with a festival." He goes on to say in verse 16 and 17, he says, "Wash yourselves, cleanse yourselves, remove your evil deeds from my sight. Stop doing evil." Verse 17, he says, "Learn to do what is good, pursue justice, correct the oppressor, defend the rights of the fatherless, plead the widow's cause." It's almost like God said, stop just being religious and start being a decent person. Start doing good things. Start trying to make the world a little bit better. Pursue justice. The one who's oppressing someone else, stop them. Defend the rights of the fatherless, the orphan. Plead the widow's cause. And in the Old Testament, it would say that all the time. It would say, defend the orphan and plead the widow's cause, or look after the orphan and the widow. It would say that all the way through the Old Testament. And it was just like a figure of speech. It was a way to say, be there for the people who are in need. Be there for the people who can't stand up for themselves. Be there for the people that everybody else can ignore. Be there for those people. It was like God was saying, you can be religious all you want, but what I really want is I want you to be good. I want you to be the kind of person that watches out for others. And I think we can picture what that looks like because we can think about our moms. On a Mother's Day, we can think about our moms, and we can think about our grandmas and our great-grandmothers. We can think about the people in our lives that have meant that much to us. People who are just good people. And we don't always, not everybody gets a great parent. If you've had a great parent in your life, you've been blessed. Not everybody gets that. Some people's parents depart this life and go to heaven, and they never really get the time with them. Some people have gone through abuse at home and some really difficult things. But even if that's you, even if this morning you look back on your life and you've been through the tough things and you've missed out on some of that, even if that's true, think about the people that God has put in your life since. Think about that close friend or that person at church or that one person that just cared about you a little bit and took time for you, because when we think of those people, we're thinking of the people that were doing what God wanted them to do. Don't just be religious. Be a good person. Be there for someone else. See, living for Jesus, it can't just happen on a Sunday. That's not living for Jesus. That's just being religious. God's not looking for us to add a few religious observances to our otherwise normal life. God's asking us to follow Him in everything we do. To be the person that He wants us to be. In everything. To follow God and live for Jesus by obeying Him in how we treat others. In our attitudes. And what we're like at work. And what we're like at school. And the kind of person we are to our friends, the kind of person we are to our family, the kind of person we are to people we've never met before this moment. Following God or living for Jesus happens in how you live life. And your religion is something that you practice everywhere you go and in everything you do. The kind of person that you are at work and at school and at home, that's the sort of thing that matters the most. I just wonder if there was a funeral for a church. I mean, the church. If the whole church had a funeral for the church was over, and they had a funeral for the church, and everybody was remembering the church in the world. I wonder, what would they say about the church? If the church got raptured to heaven, and everybody kind of gathered and talked about what life was like when the church was here, before they went to heaven. And the people sat around and they talked about churches. Would they be glad that we were raptured out of here, or would they actually miss us? What would they talk about? Would they remember? Would they talk about the abuse scandals that are going on right now? Of people who've been hurt, people who've been damaged. Would they remember us as people who condemned and judged each other? Would they remember us as just another political group that preached the gospel of politics for this party or that party? Would they think of the church? Would they think of us as people that got bent out of shape when we disagreed over the smallest of theological differences? Would they read the church obituary and associate us with being harsh, sometimes being mean, sometimes being a little bit of a jerk? I'd like to think that even if people had a bad view of the church, I'd like to think that they would still have a good view of you and me. I hope so. I hope they have a wonderful impression. Even if they even if they see all the things about the church on the media and they have a poor opinion of church, even if they themselves have had a bad experience in church, I hope they have a good opinion of you and how you've lived. I'd like to think that they saw a little bit of Jesus when you were in their life or when I was in their life. I hope so. See, Proverbs 31 is an interesting chapter because it's not just about a wife. It's not just about a girl. It's about how we live life. It's about following God by just being a good person. And there's three characteristics of this good person that I think just sort of stand out that I wanted to share with you today. And one of them was this, is that life was just better when she was around. Life was better when she was around. When she was around, it had to have been good because he just bragged on her. He bragged on her completely. If you look there at the beginning, it's King. And it looks like Lemuel. You know, I looked it up. It's actually Lemuel, but I'm not going to say that way. But it was King Lemuel or Lemuel, and he says in verse 10. If you look there with me, he says in verse 10, "Who can find a wife of noble character? She is far more precious than jewels." Verse 11, "The heart of her husband trusts in her, and he will not lack anything good." Did you notice it says, the way it says it, the heart of her husband, his heart is at ease because she's around, because she's in his life. She's made life better just by being around. He knows that she's on his side. He knows that she's going to do what needs to be done. He knows she works hard. She's faithful. She's not a drain, not a burden on him or on anybody around her, but she's a help. It goes on to say in verse 12, "She rewards her husband with good and not evil all the days of her life." Verse 13, "She selects wool and flax." Let me back up. I went too fast. "She selects wool and flax and works with willing hands." It says in verse 14 and 15, "She's like the merchant ships, bringing her food from far away." Verse 15, "She rises while it is still night and provides food for her household and portions for her female servants." This is the kind of person that people can depend on. This is the kind of person that makes your life a little bit easier. This is the kind of person that just makes your life better. Instead of being a drain on you, they're the kind of person that just helps by being there. They're just always great to have in your life. You can probably think of somebody like that that's been in your life, that just the fact that they're in your life has made your life better. Or someone who's gone to heaven already, who's gone on to be with the Lord, and that you miss them because life was just better when they were here. Are we that kind of person? Is that the kind of person we're being to other people? Are we being the kind of person that they can depend on, that they know that we're going to be on their side, that they know that we're going to support them, that they know we're going to try to do the little things to make life a little bit better? I want to brag on somebody by the name of Cheryl. I won't say which Cheryl I'm talking about, but her initials are Cheryl Ingalls. But anyway, or Cheryl Hughes Ingalls, But I do want to say that when we had 3 kids in the house and one of them had a birthday, Cheryl would start traditions. She would always start traditions. And if somebody in the house had a birthday, that meant that we were hanging ribbons. You know those streamers you get at Walmart? We were hanging those streamers all over the house. We were all over, so that when the kids got up, and whoever's birthday it was, when they got up, they would get up and all the hallway would be filled with streamers. The living room would be filled with streamers. And it would stay that way for a week. And we would hang them on the ceiling every single time we had a birthday. We were hanging streamers on the ceiling. And we had a ceiling fan. So we would tie streamers to the ceiling fan so that when it turned on, they would swirl around and that sort of thing. And we did all kinds of crazy stuff because that's what Cheryl wanted to do. And even on those days when I'm like, do we have to do this again? Cheryl's like, yes, we do. And we would do it. We would hang streamers and we would take markers, and we would mark on the mirror where the kids would get ready in the morning in their bathroom. We'd mark on the mirror, happy birthday, and say a bunch of goofy things. And we did that sort of thing because Cheryl wanted to have traditions that our kids would always remember, and they did. She made life better. And that's just one example. I could spend all day telling you the examples that she set by just having little traditions. Having a Wednesday night before we go to church picnic at the park where we're eating McDonald's. And we've been there so many times because Cheryl started that we named the duck that always came up to grab a French fry. The mother in Proverbs 31 also made life better for the people around her. Her husband's heart was at ease. He trusted her. She provided food for the people around her. That doesn't mean that you have to cook. Maybe you've got other talents. Maybe you've got other things that you can do that make a difference in somebody's life. But this wife and this mom, that's what she did. She provided food for her household. And she just made life better. And however you do it, whether you are a mom or a dad, whether you're male or female, however you do it, you can be the kind of person that makes other people's life better just by pouring your life out for them, by putting them first, by loving someone else. When you do that, it makes a huge difference. That really is love. It's just not talking about love in church. It's not just saying the right words in a church service. It's living life and living it out and just being that person that makes somebody else's life better. Life was better when she was around. She also handled her business with dignity. I almost just stopped it and said, handle your business. But she handled it with dignity. She was doing things, by the way, in Proverbs chapter 31 that women in those days couldn't always do. It's interesting, actually, because women in those days couldn't always do some of the things that she was doing. Women didn't always have the ability, especially in ancient times, but even for a long time, didn't have the ability to buy or sell land. But that's what you read in Proverbs 31. She was buying and selling land. And that sounds kind of crazy. Well, they wouldn't allow women to do that. I know, but don't get too prideful here, because it wasn't until 1839 when the state of Mississippi became the very first United States state to allow women to own property. It wasn't until 1839, and that was just the very first state. Still, nobody else did it for a long time. Wouldn't allow women to buy or sell property. And then when they did it, they allowed a woman in Mississippi to buy or sell property. She just had to have her husband's permission. Just had to have that. It was 1900 before every single state allowed women to own property and to keep their own wages. It was 1900 here. But King Lemuel's wife, she was doing that 3,000 plus years ago. In Proverbs chapter 31, verse 16, it says she evaluates a field and buys it. She plants a vineyard with her earnings. It says she draws on her strength and reveals her arms are strong. She sees that her profits are good and her lamp never goes out at night. This girl not only could buy or sell property, she had her own bank account, apparently. She had her own earnings. She was taking care of business, literally taking care of business. It goes on to say she extends her hands to the spinning staff and her hands hold the spindle. Verse 20, it says her hands reach out to the poor and she extends her hands to the needy. So she's helping others and she's helping those who are in need, and she's also helping her family. It says in verse 21, she's not afraid for her household when it snows, for all in her household are doubly clothed. Everybody's taken care of. She's taking care of her business. She's handled her business, and she's doing it with dignity. She's not only handling it, she's not creating any problems. She's not complaining. There's no word in here about her complaining, about all the difficulties that or the fights that she's in. She's handling her business, and she's doing it with dignity. There's no mention of selfishness. There's no mention of complaining. She gives, she helps, she takes care of things. And she can do it all on her own. She takes on the responsibility and she works at it. King Lemuel was obviously a fan of his wife. He was bragging on her here. I think she probably forgot things every now and then. I think she probably made decisions, sometimes bought a piece of land, and it didn't work out. And she had to sell it. I imagine things weren't perfect for her. He makes it sound that way. He was a fan. But one thing you can say about King Lemuel's wife, or the person he's talking about here, is that she took on responsibility. And she gave back to others. We honor God when we work hard to accomplish things. We honor God when we work hard to make things. We honor God when we work hard to do things. When God created Adam and Eve, God didn't create a church for them to attend. He planted a garden and He said, take care of it. Doing things in life to the best of our ability and trying to do a good job with the things that we have and the places where God has put us is a way that we can honor God. God created the earth and He told Adam and Eve, take care of it. Take charge of it. When God talked about a horse in Job chapter 39, God bragged on the horse for doing horsey things. You can go check it out. He didn't brag on a particular horse for being religious. He bragged on the horse for doing horsey things. He bragged on the mountain goat for doing mountain goaty things. He bragged on an ostrich. I have no idea how anybody could brag on an ostrich, but God did it. Proverbs 31, this woman is getting bragged on. But she's not getting bragged on for doing religious things. She's getting bragged on for doing people things. For doing things that people can do in life. But she's doing them selflessly. She's doing them well. She's working hard at it. And I am convinced that when we work hard at things, when we use our talents, when we use our skills, when we use our abilities, when we use the opportunities that God has put in front of us, we honor God. Because He created us with those things. So do a good job. Work hard. Take on responsibility. Or listen to what Paul said in Colossians chapter 3. He says, whatever you do in word or deed, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through Him. Whatever you do it all in the name of the Lord. Work with everything you have. Let that be a blessing to the world around you. See, life was better when this lady was around in Proverbs chapter 31. But she also handled her business with dignity. So it's no wonder that she earned her praise. You get the sense that her family in this chapter, her family, especially King Lemuel, is proud of her. He says, as he goes on, he says that her husband is known in the gates. He says she sells garments and belts. So she's in the community, and people in the community would come to know her because she was doing business in the community and she was selling garments and belts. And he says she has strength and dignity, and she smiles at the future, and that she shares her wisdom and she teaches other people kindness. She was the kind of person that it wouldn't just be the family, it would be the whole community would remember this person because she poured out her life for others. She watched over the activities of her household. She wasn't idle. Her children and her husband publicly praise her. It says this, her children rise up and call her blessed. Her husband also praises her. They were probably biased. They probably just thought she was awesome because they loved her. But then you get this famous verse. And this famous verse is something we really need to think about today. Here it is, the famous verse. Charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord will be praised. Now that sounds good. And most of the time when we say that verse all by itself, we say a woman who fears the Lord will be saved. You know what we think of? We think of a woman who's religious. Because it says a woman who fears the Lord will be saved. A woman who's religious. A woman who goes to church. Maybe she knows her Bible. Maybe, and obviously she knows the Lord. So we look at that, but there's not one mention in this whole chapter of people doing religious things. It's all life things. It's family. It's business. It's helping people. It's selling this. It's making that. It's just life things. Fearing the Lord, when it says that right there, it seems a little out of place until you think about it, because in the Old Testament, when you feared the Lord, it meant that you focused on the things that God gave you to do. That you focused on the things that were important to God. And you know what's important to God? Putting other people first. You know what's important to God? Caring about somebody else. So that you take care of your family because you're in the position to do it. So that you pray for your kids or your grandkids or your great-grandkids. So that you root them on and you cheer them on, because you could be doing other things and you could be spending time elsewhere, but you're a mom or you're a dad or you're a friend or you're a neighbor and you just put people first. You do a good job because you're giving to your community. You're giving a little bit back to the world. You're making it a little bit better. You're taking the gifts, the abilities, the talents that God has given you, and you're just investing them. And you're trying to make life better as long as you're here. And you're trying to take care of the business that God has given you to take care of with dignity. And when you do those things, people will remember you. And they'll be grateful for you. You will have earned some praise. And it's all because God created you and placed you in this moment and in this spot and in this family and in this world and in this church and said, go. Get to work. Put other people first. Following God happens not just in church, it happens in life. In how we live and how we conduct ourselves. And how we take the opportunities. How we take the skill set God's given us. How we take on the responsibilities He's put in front of us. And we just pour our life into others. A grandmother that blesses her family and her grandkids. At that funeral, they rose up and called her blessed. What will they say of church? What will they say of our church? What will they say of you and me? We can get serious about following God in how we live. Don't let church just be the only place where you worship Jesus. Worship Jesus at work by how you work. Worship Jesus at school by how you study and how you apply yourself. Worship Jesus in your home, not just with pictures on the wall, but in how you love the people and how you put the people in your family first. Worship God. But not just by attending a church and listening to a sermon. Worship God by following Him, and it can start today.